also has a vineyard. And Christina Wade, who is a consultant, and Carolyn Thomas, who is also a communication consultant. So we're really deeply grateful to have these folks here. Let's give them a warm welcome and turn it on over to our first speaker, Scott Bretzman.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here with you this evening. Before I spend a couple minutes talking about my own career path, I just want to say how wonderful and how great I'm thankful that all of you have made it through the pandemic. When I think of the things that we went through in university, we didn't have to face the kinds of challenges that you're facing now. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of hard work to get there. And I think you'll be, I know it probably sounds trite, but you'll be better for it as you make your way out to the workplace. So my own career path was really a windy career path. I started not in Comm Arts. I wanted to be a journalist. And so I took the journalism usage test, which I don't think exists anymore. And after 4 years of high school English, I flunked the journalism usage test twice. I wanted to be a sports writer. You know, I think I was at WSRM, which was the student radio station. The Badger Herald wrote there for a while, but I was unable to make it into journalism. So I went for the next best thing, which was Comm Arts. And then I thought I'd be a filmmaker. So I started taking lots of film production, film criticism courses, etc. Found out I was much better at watching films than I was at making them. So where to from there? So I said, well, I happen to have a little bit of skill working with data, which led me to the comm science side. And I also double majored then in psychology. I left UW for a year, and it was in the 82. And during the Reagan recession years, what else does one do when you can't find a job? You become a bartender. So I bartended for a year at the TGI Fridays out by Westtown, I think it is, and then went back to graduate school for a few years before I left again without the degree. There's a good ending to that story because I eventually got the degree, but went to work in Milwaukee for the Better Business Bureau as a mediation and arbitration coordinator, putting to use all those great things I learned in Vilas Hall about conflict management and persuasion and all of the other great courses that are offered. Moved on to the Washington, D.C. area, went to work for the National Council of Better Business Bureaus as a communications coordinator, where you would work with lots of big companies and all of the 180 individual bureaus resolving disputes that they had with these companies. Was there for a couple of years, and then I wandered over to a firm called TARP, which was a consulting practice, a global one, focused on the customer experience. How do you create a better customer experience for your customers? Was there for 13 years, spent a couple of years in London running the office there. And then after 13 years there and lots of management shakeup at the firm I was at, founded my own company, which I've owned for the last, I guess it's 19 years or so. Customer care measurement consulting. Same practices we had at TARP, which is helping lots of big companies create better experiences for their customers. And the primary emphasis is on research, where we do surveys of customers from every single industry you can imagine globally, and take that data and try and tell a story about the consequences of a bad customer experience, the financial consequences of a bad customer experience, and then try and help those companies figure out ways to improve it. So big, long, winding career path, but I'll leave you with this, and we can talk some more in the breakout room. There's never been a day where I don't draw on some of the things that I learned in Vilas Hall in all kinds of different ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Next, we will ask George Hamill. Tell us about yourself.
Gotta unmute.
Sorry about that. I thought I was going to be unmuted, but thanks for having me. folks, I'm going to tell a very windy story in much the same way that Scott told his story, and it's going to end with a lot of the same conclusion. So my whole tie to Wisconsin was that I'm an Army brat. I'm one of 7 children. And when I was in 2nd and 3rd grade, the Army sent my father to Madison to get his master's degree in journalism. And then they transferred him to the Pentagon. So I grew up in the Northern Virginia, DC area. And when I left in 3rd grade, I didn't set foot in the state of Wisconsin or ever think of going back until I got off the airplane in August to attend school there. I'm one of 7, as I said. I had a younger sister who knew from the day she was born that she wanted to be a doctor. And she is a doctor today. I am competitive. And so if my sister can know what she was going to do, I had 2 career paths that I was sure one was going to work out on. From 6th to 8th grade, I was honing my craft to be the next great rock and roll drummer. But then had to retire from that to concentrate on making it to the NBA afterwards. So but high school taught me pretty early on that I was not going to make it into the NBA. So I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to major in, where I wanted to go to school. And to top it all off, I was a middle to less than middle student. I went to a Catholic school in Northern Virginia, and I can remember my senior year, we had one meeting with the guidance nun, and she looked at my academic record and asked if I considered vocational school. So that's when I realized that, man, I got to figure something else out. So I could write a decent paragraph, and I love sports, and I knew that Wisconsin had a good journalism school. So like Scott, I applied to, and at the time that I was there, I'm a couple years older than Scott. They had what was called an open admissions policy, where it was a very low barrier to get accepted into the school, but it was a very high dropout rate after the first year when they wisely got people like me out of it. But anyway, I came to Wisconsin, said I like sports. I could write a paragraph. I'm going to be the next great sports writer. And I realized, do I really want to talk to guys in the locker room for the rest of my life after a game and get their insights on what happened? I said, I am destined for greater things than that. So, but I didn't really have a game plan. I love movies. I love music. I said, geez, Comm Arts is the place for me. And so like Scott, I was a disc jockey on what was then called Lakeshore 64. I don't know if there's still a Lakeshore radio station out of one of the dorms. I was working for, back then, what are the 2 guys who, I was a cable access channel that covered city hall meetings. So I would sit and film city hall meetings for the cable thing. What are the 2 guys they did the ad on, they had the show Wayne's World. Think of that, about that, except I was behind the camera filming government, really thrilling stuff to do. And in my senior year, I convinced, only because I wasn't a great student, I convinced a professor in Comm Arts to let me get an intern, if I could secure an internship, that I could do that for my last credits for my senior year. And I was able to get accepted into an internship program at the ABC affiliate in Washington, DC at the time. So I got accepted into the program, and once you got accepted, you had to interview within the station to figure out what department you were going to be working in. And so the first interview that I went to was with the news department. Now, mind you, they didn't have Success Works when I was there. And the only jobs I'd ever had, if I filled in an application and spelled my name right, I usually got hired. So there was this notion of how to present yourself, how to communicate, anything. I had no idea. So this is a first interview where someone was actually asking me questions that I didn't write down on an application. And the final question that the editor of the news department asked me was, and I've come to believe it's a lousy interview question, and I'll tell you why in a second. But they asked me if you could name one of my bad habits. If I could name one of my bad habits, what would it be? Now today, if you were asking me how to answer that question, I'd say something like, I get lost on my work and I lose all track of time, or something along those lines. You make up some bullshit answer to it. I, on the other hand, raised to be an honest man, had never been in an interview before. I said, I can be a bit lazy at times. And I knew that I wasn't going to be assigned to the news department when his response was lazy. So I ended up on a morning talk show there instead of being in the news department. And I had a great time. But at the end of that internship, after majoring in communication arts and radio, TV, and film, I realized not what I wanted to do. So I had to figure out from there what I want to do. What were my assets? I was a decent writer. I still like sports. The class I think in Comm Arts that was most impactful on me was a speech class that I took where they videotaped you several times giving speeches. And there's nothing more sobering than to watch yourself give a speech, in front of your classmates. I was rocking back and forth. I was leaning over. I was looking at my feet, all these things. It was the best lesson I ever learned in terms of how to tell stories and talk about ourselves, talk about myself. So my career path, I ended up coaching JV basketball in a local high school. I then went to work for Merrill Lynch. From there, I went to a money management firm and ultimately ended up co-founding a pretty successful investment firm in San Francisco. And have just come out of retirement from that to restart another investment firm with my former business partner there. So as I think about how did Comm Arts really impact me, I don't know if any of you were on last night's session like this, but I listened in because I wanted to prep a little. Unusual for me. I usually wing things. I heard Kelly Call. I heard Sean Hanish. All these people say, what is filmmaking? It's telling a story and all that stuff. Well, you know what? I tell stories for a living. That's really what I do. I talk, now it's the same story over and over. So I've memorized, it's kind of like Groundhog Day or Palm Springs, if any of you have seen that movie, where I keep reliving the same story time and time again, not with as much humor as in either of those movies. But so, Comm Arts gave me the ability to communicate clearly, to be not afraid of trying new things. And, I would say if you're open to possibilities and you know how to talk about the things that you've learned that make you differentiated from having been a Comm Arts alum, then as long as you're open to the possibilities, the world can be your oyster, whether it's playing in the NBA, being a rock and roll drummer, or being a filmmaker, or being none of those things. I'm one of those stories that are none of those things, but I've done okay. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Next, we'll turn it over to Carolyn Thomas.
Great, thanks, Michael. And good evening, everyone. I wish I were in Madison right now. I live south of Denver, and we're bracing for a major snowstorm. And they've predicted, no kidding, almost 4 feet of snow at my house. So Madison sounds pretty good right now. But I have a much shorter career story. Because I haven't moved around as much as some of my former colleagues, but my path to get there was a little bit more a winding road. So I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and when I was deciding where to go to school, my calculus was in-state tuition at the best school furthest from home. So the choices I thought ahead of me were either University of Minnesota or University of Wisconsin. And University of Wisconsin won because it was 3 hours from home versus 90 minutes. So I went to Madison, and I think I originally was a pre-business major. And I had been our DECA president in high school and was really focused on marketing at the time. And so I got down to Madison, was fairly immature, didn't quite really know what I wanted to do. So from pre-business, I think I dabbled in journalism for a hot minute. Through that, was a copy editor at the Daily Cardinal for a few semesters, and eventually got to the point, I think I was English for a little bit too, but after, I guess, 3 years, 3 years, going and registering for my, first semester of my, no, 2 years, registering for the first semester of my third year, I sat down on my apartment floor with a course book, because they used to be printed back then, and I was leafing through it and trying to figure out what is my fastest way out of school. And through that process, I found communication arts. I had taken a comm science methods class, and I had taken the speech class. So I had a few credits going in, and I had a couple of English credits that were going to count for something. And at the time, it was either communication science or radio, TV, and film. Now, mind you, I wasn't selecting this major because I was passionate about it. I was selecting it because I wanted to graduate, and then I was going to go to grad school and really figure out what I wanted to do. So I had a roommate who was a radio, TV, and film major who I really didn't like. And so I decided comm science it is. So you can imagine I had many classes in other areas under my belt at that point. So I was very comm science heavy those first couple semesters. And at the time there was a visiting professor, and I ended up in 2 of her classes. So she was teaching the Intro to Persuasion class, and she was teaching health communication. And the health communication class was actually, they shouldn't have let undergraduate students sign up for it. There was some error in the system, and it was funny. I had her class like on a Monday, and then on Tuesday I show up for her health communication class, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "I don't know. I signed up for the health communication class." And she said, "Well, it's supposed to be a graduate level class only." Well, there was 3 of us in the class who were undergrads, and everybody else was graduate students. And she said, "Look, here's what we'll do." It was a once a week lecture, 3 hours in the evenings. And she said, the first hour will be for everyone. And then the second 2 hours will be for grad students, but you're welcome to stay. And given the fact that all of my experiences at that point had been as a server and a bartender, I thought if I'm going to do this, I might want to invest a little time in it. So I did. And long story short, she ended up then, and one of the graduate students in that class recommended me to be a research assistant for one of the other professors. It was the professor who she was filling in for at the time. He was on paternity leave or sabbatical, and they knew when he came back, he was going to want a research assistant. So they said, "Would you be interested?" And I was bartending at Wando's at the time, and he came in for lunch, this professor, along with one of the other graduate students who I knew. And that was my interview. I was serving the lunch crowd while we were getting to know each other. And he was like, "So can you come in on Monday?" So that worked out. I was a research assistant for that summer, and then the following semester, and then I graduated that winter. So in the meantime, at the beginning of my final semester, I graduated in the winter, fall semester. He received an email from a former colleague of his who was a former professor, had taught at Temple, and had started his own consulting firm. And the founder of our firm, Randall, emailed this professor and said, "Hey, we're looking for people. Here's what we're looking for." And they were actually recruiting communication science majors. It might be, and I still don't know, but it might be one of the only firms that I've ever come across who intentionally looks for communication science majors. The professor said, "Are you interested?" And I was sort of surprised that he would recommend me. I was like, "Are you sure?" Because this email sounded very like heavy. It was like, "We're only looking for the best," and da 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 da. And I was like, "You're going to stake your reputation and recommend me?" And he said, "Of course." Well, I've been with the same firm ever since. So I reached my 20-year service anniversary on January 15th of this year. I started at the firm when I had just turned 23. And, like I said, we were one of the few firms, I think, that really, I use communication theory every single day in my job. No question. I still read comm monographs. Which some of you probably think that sounds terrible, but that's who we are. So what we do is we focus on helping large companies communicate where they're going to their employees. So I didn't have any organizational communication classes at the time, but as you can imagine, most things in life come down to relationships. So there's a lot of interpersonal communication theory that we draw on constantly. So we think about how do you help the organization communicate where they're going. We also do a fair amount of leadership coaching and leadership development. And we also have a research practice that does qualitative and quantitative assessments. So yeah, that's us and CRA. And George, joined last night too for a little bit and was able to hear some of the introductions from some of our other speakers. And Kelly mentioned, he said that a lot of what he has done has come down to luck and hard work, which I think my story is definitely, there's a lot of luck there and a lot of hard work, but I would also say it's about relationships. You know, whether it was the high school teacher I had who was my DECA advisor, or Professor Dillard who I did research with, or it was Professor Green and Christy Carson who had introduced me to Jim Dillard, or it was Jim who introduced me to our founder Randall. Every single one of those steps was based on a relationship that I had. And so my hard work and a little bit of luck, or probably a lot of luck actually, helped me get where I am today. So, and it's home at this point. I've been a partner at the firm for over half of my tenure at the firm, and it's a pretty great place to be.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. And last but not least, we'll ask Christina Wade, tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and excited for the conversations ahead and to tell you a little bit about myself. So I graduated with a degree in Comm Arts in 2007. And I was also on the radio, TV, film side, thinking I was going to do something in the entertainment industry. And I did for a little bit. I started, after I declared the major, I had several internships in radio in the Madison area when I was in school. And then I'm from the Milwaukee area. So in the Milwaukee area when I was like home for the summers and things like that. And I got a summer internship at a radio group in Milwaukee, and then just sort of never left. Eventually they ended up hiring me when I graduated. And I was there for a number of years working in promotions and marketing and just loving it. But ultimately realizing it probably wasn't going to be a forever place for me. And so then just started to think about, you know, what skills do I have that I can take elsewhere? Things like storytelling and knowing how to talk to your audience, or if you don't know how to talk to them, how to figure that out, and different tools of communication and things like that. So I was able to kind of transfer some of my skills to a different marketing role. And it was kind of a 180. I ended up at a trade association for heavy equipment manufacturers. But it was interesting, and I was able to get a lot of really good experience there. And then when I was looking to move on, I ended up taking a role in legal marketing, but it was because of my manufacturing experience that I got that role. And then I discovered professional services, which I really enjoy. And I worked in legal marketing for a number of years, and now I am at a large accounting consulting firm, and I work in their in-house agencies. So it's a little different. If you are at a company, a lot of times you'll engage with like an external marketing agency to help you with, any number of promotions. And we have one of those in-house. A lot of large companies have those nowadays. And so I'm an account supervisor there. So it's interesting because my clients are also my colleagues, but that makes it a lot of fun too. And I've been here 4 years now, and it's a fantastic place to be, and I don't ever want to leave. But I would second all of the comments, and third the comments about using something I've learned in Comm Arts every single day. Maybe it's not, the most conventional thing, but I definitely am constantly drawing on the things I learned at UW in my everyday life, and I'm really grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks to all 4 of our panelists. I have just a very quick presentation. So the rest of this program is going to take place in breakout rooms. So all 4 of our alumni guests will be in a separate breakout room. We just put some resources and more information about the alumni in the chat. So we encourage students to navigate between the breakout rooms, maybe every 15 or 20 minutes. You can obviously stay as long as you like, but we want you to get some exposure to a variety of career paths and experiences that our panelists can bring. And once you're in the breakout rooms, it's your time to ask questions. You can raise your hand, you can turn on your mic and ask a question live, or you can put it in the chat room. There will be a monitor or moderator in the room to help facilitate that. So in a minute, when we turn on the breakout rooms, you'll see a screen like this pop up. And in order to join the room, you just click on the little blue join link next to the room that you'd like to go into. So the alumni and the moderators will be moved automatically. Students, you'll stay in the main room, and then you'll have to choose which room you want to go to. So our alumni will be in these 4 rooms. Scott will be in room 1, George in room 2, Carolyn in room 3, and Christina in room 4. And those labels will be on the breakout rooms in Zoom. And that's it